You got numbers too, Evan? Yep. Dr. Malone, it's April 20th. We're going into our 6th week of remote working here at the office. We have been able to, fortunately, sign up new clients today still, just like every other day. And we have done a decent job of communicating with current clients via Zoom and whatever other platform we're preparing them for depositions and other type of testimony they may be giving. We did a couple of those today. In any event, we're working, but we're all working remotely. This is the 6th week that we have been working remotely. And I haven't seen people on my staff in that long, despite the fact that everybody's still working full time. So it's a little different for sure. But here we are in the 6th week. We're at a critical time in our country because everybody's antsy. Everybody wants to get back to their normal routine. They may or may not have known somebody that has been affected by this virus. And here we are in a position where this is like the critical step. And if you make a misstep here, we're going to be right back to where we were 6 weeks ago. And I don't think anybody wants to be where we were 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, staring at this awesome and disgusting virus who lurching down on all of us and ruining our economy, ruining our jobs, ruining our places of work, our places of worship, our places of fun, our places of activity. So anyway, I think we have to be very careful about how we reintegrate back into this and methodical about it. And there's all kinds of literature that suggests we need to have widespread testing and tracing, contact tracing, in place before we do this. And the consensus among the experts is, and among other countries' experts, is that we're not testing enough people. You know, we can have the most tests of any other country that's reported, right? Because we're bigger than all of them except for China, which is not giving us good data. So it's really not fair to say we have the most of any other country, because we're the biggest of any other country that has so far provided factual data. The experts are in full agreement across the board that we're testing around 100,000 per day, I believe, and we need to be testing around 500,000 per day. And so we're way off that mark. And we have 600 contact tracers with the CDC for normal stuff, everyday stuff, and we need closer to 200,000 or 300,000 for contact tracing. None of that's in place. The tests are not available yet on a widespread basis, and everybody wants to go ahead and jump back into this. Okay, not a good idea. I brought up, I'm going to let you talk in a second, but I told you before I started, the New York Times, however you feel about this paper, it still remains the world's most read newspaper. And it happens to be, in large part, if you put aside the editorial pages of the paper, if you want to do that, the news part of the paper still is a very reputable source of information. I don't think it should be your only source of information, just like I don't think any news source should be your only source of information. But I did find some pieces of information from yesterday's New York Times that I thought was interesting, starting with the pictures that I think are graphic that I think is very helpful for us to see. And it dealt with the aerosol issue that we've talked about several times in these videos, the droplets and how far they go. So if you're gonna go back to work, basically, again, this is Sunday's New York Times. They broke down basically and said, listen, this stuff, if it's sneezed, which I didn't know a sneeze was stronger than a cough, but a sneeze actually can propel these aerosols up to 26 feet. This, you can't see it probably really well, but the second ring is 6 feet, okay? And so back here is 26 feet. And they're saying that these aerosols, the fine aerosols, can actually linger back to 26 feet, okay? That's with somebody without a mask that's sneezing, okay? But look at all the contamination within 15 feet, which is 16 feet is here, okay? Look at all this contamination under 10 feet, Nobody's talking about that in the news. All they're talking about is 6 feet. But look at all this contamination between 6 and 10 feet. That's like, it's all over you there, right there, right? So, of course, this thing went on to say breathing also does it here. This is just a breathing kind of deal down here. This is no coughing, no sneezing. This is just breathing. And then this shows the benefits of the mask here, as you can see there, and how it redirects and catches a lot of the particles, the droplets and the aerosols, and it just goes straight up and straight down. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting article, interesting read. And there was a couple other tidbits of information in this paper. I'm going to speak very quickly about a couple of them. They went to Germany, and Germany has 83 million people, and it's aiming to sample the entire population for antibodies. And it's already started that. So they knock on people's doors currently, and they basically ask you to be part of the program. And if you say yes, 2 days later, somebody comes and they start taking blood from you and your spouse, if you both agree. And they produce their own high quality test kits. They're doing 120,000 a day for a country that is 3 times, almost 4 times smaller than us. And they're doing the exact same number per day. They have a pretty good handle on things, and they started opening up their economy a little bit. They got the infection, every 10 people that are infected with the virus now pass it to 7 others. And this was a sharp decline in the infection rate for the virus. I don't remember what ours was up to when it was at its highest. Evan, do you remember that?
They were estimating that one infected person was spreading it to be between 2 and 3 people.
Okay. So if there was 10, that'd be what, closer to 20, I guess, or 30 versus 7?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They did a test of a whole town. It was 12,000 people in Northwest Germany. Tested the first group of residents, found that 14% have antibodies to the virus, and another 2% tested positive for the virus, raising hopes that about 15% of the local population may have already come into some degree of immunity. So that was a full town that was tested, and they found that 15% of the total population had either had it or had the antibodies for it, and which obviously is something great to know, right? But we don't yet. We don't know that yet. As a side note, Angela Merkel evidently is a scientist with, and her background is a PhD or a scientist of some sorts. There was some comparison over the weekend I saw to car wrecks, Dr. Oz. I think we talked about this briefly. Heart disease, cancer. We put those numbers up last week. The virus has killed more than 1,800 Americans almost every day since April 7th. By comparison, heart disease typically kills 1,774 Americans a day, and cancer kills 1,641. But keep in mind, this is new. Like, this is new per day. This is a brand new thing that we're dealing with. It's now as fatal as cancer. So if you want to look at it that way, we got a brand new cancer and a brand new heart disease just overnight. Only when tens of thousands of antibody tests are done will we know how many silent carriers there are in the United States. The CDC has suggested it might be 25% of those who test positive. Researchers in Iceland said it might be double that. I think there was a town in China that I read in here that they originally had reported a 1% carrier rate, and it turned out it was 60% carrier rate when they actually did the test. And this was news to me that the virus, you know how in the movies the virus gets stronger, and as it grows and grows and grows, it starts getting meaner and kills people faster and is harder to beat. Well, I think in actuality, this particular scientist, Dr. Let's see who it is. Well, they're quoting the CDC. The virus may also be mutating to cause fewer symptoms. In movies, viruses become more deadly. In reality, they usually become less so because asymptomatic strains reach more host people Even the 1918 Spanish flu virus eventually faded into the seasonal H1N1 flu, which I didn't know that. I didn't know the Spanish virus actually morphed into something less fatal, which I thought was interesting. China didn't allow some of the hotspots to open until intensive surveillance found 0 new cases for 14 straight days. They compared that to how Americans can still take domestic flights, drive where they want, roam the streets and parks like people are doing downtown right now. Still arranging discrete play dates for kids, holding back, having backyard barbecues, and meeting people on dating apps. China has recently just closed their movie theaters again. I think Singapore and South Korea are also dialing back after opening up their economies again. This person says, as Dr. Frieden, who I guess was head of the CDC at one point, or reopening requires declining cases for 14 days, the tracing of 90% of contacts, and an end to healthcare worker infections, recuperation places for mild cases, and many other hard to reach goals. The other thing I noted in here was that China, if you tested positive for the virus, even if you had a perfectly nice basement at your house and your family was perfectly able to take care of you, they didn't care. They picked you up, or not picked you up, they plopped you up out of your house and they threw you into like an infirmary place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of your symptoms, right? And they said, all right, you tested positive, so you're now going to this place. And you've got to stay there until you're symptom free and you test negative for this. We don't care if you've got, like Chris Cuomo has a great basement and is downstairs with a nice family upstairs that's bringing him food, right? They didn't care about that. They were more militant than we're ever going to be, okay? Because of the nature of their government and their society is a lot more closed. But we've got to take that into account when we talk about opening back up, because if even a draconian military-like society with less freedoms has trouble reintegrating into the economy, even when they plopped people out of their houses and stuck them in infirmaries when they tested positive. These aren't symptom people. These are people who just tested positive. They wanted them to segregate from everybody else so they couldn't spread it anymore. So, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
As far as the last point there,
Yes.
I think that's definitely, like, in an ideal setting, it'd be great to be able to do that. And you know, we were in a situation like a couple weeks ago where people were being diagnosed and being sent home
Right.
from the hospital. So, you know, I guess what's the cutoff for the triage? You have to do it consistently across all geographies and all hospital systems, basically. I think that'd be the tough part to enforce, or at least where there's hotspots, you know?
Yep. And the other thing we need to be thinking about, I mean, everybody's talking about test kits and swabs and reactivation agents, regeneration agents, whatever they're called. What nobody's talked about yet is, okay, let's say you come up with a vaccination. And let's say it involves just one dose per person. Well, you're going to need about 300 million. And our vaccination system is set up to vaccinate newborns and people that are 65. And they say that's about 10 million people a year. So our vaccination system is set up to put out 10 million vaccination doses a year. And we're going to need 300 million. And if it's 2 doses of a vaccine, we're going to have 600 million doses of vaccine, which, depending on how it's administered, you're going to need whatever they administer it with. Like, is it a needle? Is it a lozenge? Whatever it is that it has to be administered with, whatever hardware comes with the administration of this vaccination, we're going to need to ramp up on production of that too. So nobody's talking about that yet, because we're not at a vaccine yet. But when we're setting up these places to do the test kits and to do the swabs, somebody should be thinking about, okay, at some point in time, we're going to have a vaccine, hopefully in the next year, and we're going to have to ramp up needles, ramp up syringes, ramp up if they're things that they stick on your arm. I mean, I don't know how they're talking about doing this, but it's probably most likely going to be a needle, right? And we're not going to be able to find 600 million syringes and needles like that. So I think somebody should be thinking along down the road here a bit and preparing for that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very valid point. And then it's the delivery as well. So if you think, 15 years ago, people used to go get their flu shots at their doctor's office, right? And here we are in 2020, and you go to your local pharmacy. So the system, I guess, flexed to allow people to make it more convenient to get their shots. So you could be driving down the road, pull into your pharmacy, show me your insurance card, you get your shot. You don't have to make an appointment. Don't have to go in the doctor's office where they're wasting resources trying to give you a shot. So it needs to be
We've done a
streamlined.
video. You and I've done a video with a Walgreens pharmacist doing flu shots. Remember that last year?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Is that what you're thinking? That would be a sufficient way of doing it, to have it routed through pharmacies? That still seems like not enough, right?
Well, yeah, and I don't think that that's the answer, but that's an example of how with the flu, the system has flexed to allow it to become more available. So you have to think that, what's the next step to make it more available? Is it pharmacies? And then what's the next branch point that goes out to make it even more broad of a net that you can cast?
Right.
And so I don't know if you set up places in people's neighborhoods or in different parts of communities and make it so it's, hey, here's some hours, and if your last name starts with this, then you come this day, and if not, then you come the next day. It's kind of like voting, like you have precincts.
I was just going to say that. I think we could use the voting precincts potentially, or since that infrastructure is already there. The other thing I was going to point out is, just like I started this by saying, you don't want to rely on any one news source, right? There's an article about how the 39% of the country that mainly watches MSNBC doesn't think we've overreacted. 79% who mainly watch Fox think we have overreacted. And 54% who watch CNN think we've overreacted. At the end of the day, this is what you should do. This is a life and death situation. So you probably shouldn't just go with one, right? I think on every crucial issue, I want to know what everybody's saying about it. I want to know what the New York Times is saying. I want to know what the Wall Street Journal is saying. I want to know what Fox is saying about it, because I want to hear the other side of the story. I want to know what CNN is saying, and I want to know what MSNBC is saying. It's not safe on life and death issues for you to rely on one news source, okay? Period, end of story, all right? And that's why I think it makes sense to look at multiple news sources, and then also remember, what are they citing me to? And what is their basis? And that's what I've liked about these videos, is that you, Dr. Malone, when you say things, you're not saying them as an opinion. You're saying them after reading the most recent studies of the people that should know the answers to these questions, right?
Yep. And my research every day, if you saw my browser tabs, some people would probably get dizzy at how many tabs I have open, because I'm always like, okay, now I got to find, where this study is, and I got to find this, you start at a headline and go kind of dig into it. So like Joe said, it's more than just one resource. I'm looking at multiple journal publications, multiple societies or organizations, and trying to say, okay, what's across all these, is it consistent? Is the story the same? And is there a real outlier? And is that the good one or the bad one? So it's a good way to go about getting your news.
Speaking of getting a wide variety of opinions, there's one particular article that was on the front page of the paper here that's titled "What the Next Year or Two May Look Like for Us Here," and they talked to 20 experts in public health, medicine, epidemiology, and history, and shared their thoughts on what the future is going to be like for us. The inconsistency of all of them was, this is not going away anytime soon. And if you think you're just going to reintegrate into the business world and this is going to go away because of the weather, or because of herd immunity, or because you think America's got some weird immunity to these things, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And you're making a very critical mistake. So now, they also say there are ways to reintegrate that are smart, and with proper testing and tracing, you can do it and it not be that detrimental. So now, all that being said, I know I spoke a lot today. I shouldn't have, but that was a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
Where are we, Dr. Malone, locally with our numbers?
Okay, so locally we have in the county, we on Friday when we signed off, we were at 290 cases in the county, and now we're at 315 as of this afternoon here. And the deaths actually sadly jumped up to 8 in Escambia County. Again, about this time last week, we were at 3 or 4, depending which day you look at, Monday or Tuesday. And then the long-term care facilities infection rate in Escambia County is up to 65. And I think over the course of the weekend, a list of 11 facilities in the county
What are they?
was published. Good question. I don't want to speak.
I saw that the governor had said that, I guess he signed something saying that they could identify themselves now.
Yeah, and so the state put this out. Let me get the list pulled up here. It was some of the ones that we already knew about.
The Arbors and Gulf Breeze.
Yeah, so that's Santa Rosa County. That's not one of
Right.
the 11. So the 11 facilities. That's the one where they had like 8 or 10 cases that
Right.
were linked. So the 11 in our county are Arcadia Health and Rehab, Asbury Place, Brookdale, DeLuna Health, Homestead Village, Olive Branch Health, Rehab Center at Park Place, Rosewood Healthcare, Southern Oaks, Specialty Health and Rehab Center, and West Point Retirement Community. That was, and then there's one facility in Santa Rosa County, and that was the Arbors, and that one facility had all, I guess, 9 or 10. I think now it's 10 of their infected individuals. So the numbers are out there, and I guess now it's acting on it, and the state sending assistance in the form of like testing, on-site testing, or trying to coordinate that to, I guess, cast that net wider as far as testing within each of these facilities, but also trying to get these facilities, up to snuff, I guess, with what the CDC recommendations are, as far as trying to separate the people that are positive with the staff that are positive, and try and keep this thing at bay. So, so that's the long-term care facilities. Social scoring, we moved from the D's to a C- at the most recent check today. So I guess that's better news. But
that's good. Better news. Still not
I'll take it. And the Santa Rosa County was still floating in the Fs. This morning when I checked. Yeah, Santa Rosa County still had an F. For
how many Fs? Were you able to see how many Fs are across the state of Florida? Are they just an anomaly, or is it like a common thing?
I can pull it up right now on my end, at least, and we'll be able to share it in real time here.
Is it a color? Like, do Fs get a certain color?
Yeah, they do. It's like this, like deep red. So there's there were 3 Fs. Actually, Santa Rosa County is a D- now.
Oh,
there were 3 Fs. There's 3 Fs. I just refreshed my browser. Sumter County, Marion County, and Hernando County. But Santa Rosa County was in that earlier today, and they've moved up to a D-.
All right. How many Ds are there then?
D-, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 D-.
Okay.
Another like 5 Ds.
Probably C's and B's.
Yeah. So there's no A's anymore right now. Right now, no.
Wow.
And there's 10 B's, and everybody else is C, D, or F.
Okay.
So it's not really a great bell curve right now. So.
All right. What other pieces of information do you have for us locally, I guess, first?
Locally, it was basically those numbers and then the names of those facilities that I had for you. And then I know that there's some mention of, how to start rolling out the city's, I guess, slow unlocking, I guess, is what I would hope for. And I think that's on a mayoral level, and I think working with some of the other entities with the Department of Health and emergency services in the county. So we'll see. I hadn't seen a whole lot of specific details on that, so we'll pay attention to those as they come out. And then I think that there was going to be the meeting about opening up the beaches or not. It was going to be the board of commissioners. So I don't know what's going to come of that either. You know, personally, I'm in your camp, and I read enough things here where saying, you know, don't do it prematurely, you know, and I guess I trust the electors that they make the right decision in concert with the.
If we could get a hold of some testing kits, and we could test a substantial percentage of our county, I don't know,
Yeah,
10, 20%. And then you could put out the numbers after you test it and say, well, okay, we tested this many people. We did a random selection of voters or whatever, driver's license numbers, whatever. And we tested those people from across the county, and we came up with this number. And it was 50% or 40% of the people didn't know they had it. I think that would resonate with people. Like, shit, if I go to the beach and and out of the people that are there is, you know, 30, 40% of them are going to be completely normal, but they are going to be carriers.
Yeah.
I think people in high risk groups are going to be very attentive to that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think people that are not high risk, but are around high risk people are going to be very attentive to that. I think the only people who are going to be on the beach, if you publicize that kind of stuff and make it clear, are people that just don't care, and they're going to be out there anyway. And, you know, I don't know that you can say anything to those people that's going to change their behavior. So, some people are hard-headed.
So with that in mind, I'll share this first. Last week we had a journal article that we had from Santa Clara County in California. So this one is from up in Chelsea, outside of Boston. And so Massachusetts General basically went out and they tested 200 people like in their town square. So the people that were walking up, they could walk up and sign a waiver, and they get a finger prick test for the antibody. So they tested 200 people that came and signed up for this thing, and 64 of them had it.
Wow.
That's a third. That's a third of the comers. Now, you know, is there some selection bias? Meaning, like, if I was walking down the street, well, first of all, if I was walking down the street, am I paying attention to the lockdown? Right. That's number one. Number two.
How do they pick these people again?
They gave, I think they gave them $5 for their time, and they like signed a waiver, and they also
just randomly saw them on the street.
Yeah, they were set up like in their equivalent of like a town square or like a downtown area. And so anyhow, they tested these people, and I think the understanding was that they wouldn't get the specific results to the individual. So if I was walking down the street, they could test me, but they're not going to call me with the result. That was the understanding. They're just drawn blood. And so a third of these comers had it. So, you know, is there some selection bias? Meaning, oh, I'm intrigued, I want to get my blood drawn, you know, or I'm afraid of needles and I don't want to do it.
Those are all the people that weren't obeying the shelter in place rules to start with, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that they weren't obeying, but that's the things that you think about when you read a study like this, saying, you know, okay, well, what were they doing out anyhow? So anyhow, the lead researcher says, you know, it's sobering, 30% of a random group of 200 people showing up without symptoms, and they have been or are infected. And it's more the reason why people need to practice physical distancing is the takeaway. So there are groups out there trying to get this data, like what you just said about testing the entire county here, like the study that we talked about last week in Santa Clara County in California, where they
study in Germany we just talked about.
Yeah, that, and then they did it in Iceland and some other. They're trying to, you know, what's that formula you can plug and chug an input number of a population and say this is the percentage of the number of people that have it. Doctor,
how about this? Have you seen a study that says we were looking to see how many silent cases of the virus or carriers there were, and it was a lot less than we thought?
I haven't seen any of that.
Okay, it's always
all higher.
A lot more than you thought, right? So
yep.
Every study we've seen from China to Cincinnati has been more than they thought. So guess what, folks? It's probably true, okay? You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC or Fox. But every study that we have looked at, medical study, a scientific study that was trying to figure out whether they were asymptomatic carriers, they have all found the answer is yes. And they all found that the number is somewhere between 30 and 60%, which is a large amount of people. Now, that should also send you a little bit of like security. Like, well, that means a lot of people aren't that affected by this, right? Which is good news. But at the same time, that means there's a lot of carriers out there that are transmitting the virus to each other. And as soon as it gets to that person, then to a high risk person, they're going to get it. And so the more people that are carriers, the more likely the high risk people are going to end up with it. And that's, you know, you don't want to kill off a certain percent of your population that are high risk. And I don't know if you have a number for that, but what is the number of our population? Well, I think you did say last week. What was the percent of our population that was morbidly obese or obese?
Oh, it was like that was
30.
like it was like, yeah, it was like 34 or 36%. That was under the age of 65. That was morbidly obese, and they were considered a high risk group just because that, and people were ignoring that under 65 group. We're going to always just talk about age. So yeah, 36% of the population.
We're not talking about the 600-pound people on TV. Like, we're talking about morbidly obese just means that your BMI is like, what is it?
Over 35. It was over 35. So yeah, so and again, that's 240, 250 pounds. So there's a lot of people walking around like that, and they don't look that big to you because you're used to it. But you go to a different country, you don't see 250-pound people.
Right. And so that's why this is dangerous for us. Okay. And that's not to mention all the nursing home personnel that go into nursing homes and take care of people. Those are hardworking folks, but most of them don't have RN degrees. Most of them are LPNs or CRNA, medical assistants, right? And so they don't have advanced degrees, and most of them, it's a 2 or 3. Is it a 2-year program to get a medical assistant, or a 1.5 years?
Yeah, I'm not completely familiar with it.
But long and short of it is, these are hardworking folks that you know, bust their fannies every day working in these facilities, doing work that is heroic on just a regular day, and you're expecting them to what? Segregate themselves from their families and make sure they're not coming in contact with people, and then, you know, I know they don't make a ton of money to start with, right? So what are they supposed to use PPE at the house, and I mean, stay in a hotel? And I mean, come on. I mean, it's just a matter of time before you get every nursing home in the city infected.
Yep.
I mean, that's what the second phase of this is unfortunately going to look like, is that, okay, all the healthy people and all the people that are not high risk, you know, maybe they had a flu symptom or two, but they passed it on to high risk people and killed them all. I mean, it's that simple, I would think. And until we get a vaccine or some kind of treatment that allows for us to treat high risk people and successfully treat them, we are playing with fire, literally. And the nursing home and the long-term care facilities are the tinderbox, like you have said before. So what else do you have for us today?
So along the lines of, let's see, along the lines of what you had mentioned with the airborne and aerosol stuff. So the CDC put this out. Let's see if I can. So the CDC puts this out, and you'll notice here, look at the publication date, July 2020. They're doing an early release of this article, the CDC is.
Wow. Okay.
And it was important for them to get this information out. Air conditioning was traced to spread of the aerosol in China. So I know that, you take that with a modicum of some reservation, but to know that CDC is publishing this, and here's the takeaway, is they had this chart on here, and they tracked this restaurant And so this is the diagram of the restaurant, and they give you all the dimensions there, where the tables are and where these people were sitting with the dates. So A1 was the infected individual. And then the red circles represent the dates that everybody else got infected. And so they're showing you the airflow of going from your right to your left. So table B is a family that all got infected basically at the same time. And they trace it, and it has to do with the airflow of this air conditioner pushing it across the room, because table C didn't get infected until it was a different timeline. So they're thinking that it has something to do with recirculated air, with the way that the air conditioning is blowing these things. So it is aerosolized to some degree.
So wait a minute. Go back to that, because this is what you're saying is the people at table C actually got a more potent shot of it because they're sitting next to the air conditioner. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then the people at table B still got the downwind version because it was recirculating the air in the room.
Yeah, but it took longer for them to show symptoms, I guess, or whatever, right?
Yeah. So they're saying.
And what about tables F and E?
I don't think that they studied, like, if you see this diagram here, tables A, B, and C, they show the airflow across those tables. I think that's what they were worried about here. But the takeaway was that they're thinking that, you had mentioned, for instance, today, hey, breathing on stuff and coughing on stuff and sneezing on stuff. Add a air conditioner unit to it, something that's pushing air in addition to your own cough, breathe, or sneeze. And it's like doing like a drift dive when you go scuba or snorkeling, right? The boat drops you off and picks you up 5 miles later. You didn't swim 5 miles, right? So it's something else is doing the work. And here they're saying the air conditioner with these aerosolized agents can do that, and that's implication that the takeaway is, on some of these reopening kind of stuff, like where normally the restaurant would fill all those tables up, but is it going to have to be something where they fill some proportion of those tables up, or whatever the case may be? I don't know, but the CDC put this out there to try and add to the discussion. So that's there, but then I hadn't planned on sharing this, but since you brought it up, I had it ready to go, as always. This, you just have to read the practical implications here. So these people, they studied like basically the physics of droplets, and there's a whole equation that they use to calculate how long it's in the air and all that stuff. So
sneezing is 50 meters per second, and is that right?
That's the speed, and so it's 50 meters per second, but it can be carried more than 6 meters away.
Wow.
That's your 18 feet. I know you've been talking 26, but the point being that this is much more than the 6 feet. And then and then they're saying that the breathing comes out at 1 meter per second, goes 1 meter away. So they got some numbers on here, and if you look at this, they say they're looking at the Wells evaporation falling curve. Like, this is physics. This is not medicine. This is physics. And these people are looking at this, and their takeaway is they want to talk about the transmission mechanisms and infectious diseases. There needs to be a need to examine air distribution systems in hospital wards for controlling both airborne and droplet-borne transmitted diseases. So this, coupled with what I just showed you from the CDC, take it all together and say, what's the policy going to be?
Don't they do negative pressure? And what does that mean when they have a negative pressure room?
So a negative pressure room would be the opposite of that picture we just saw, where the air conditioner was blowing in. It recirculates air, but it's always pulling out more than it's pushing in. And so like when you open a negative pressure room door, if it's sealed appropriately, you can actually feel like the door is a little bit more difficult to open than normal. And so people in medicine and hospitals have been using that for a long time. There's usually like a certain set amount of rooms in the hospital that are negative pressure capable. And that's usually where, when someone gets admitted with the suspicion of tuberculosis, that patient gets put in there. You got to gown up, all this stuff like we're doing now with the virus. You got to do that every time you go in the room, and it's negative pressure. So until you prove that individual does or does not have tuberculosis.
But if you're in an office, doctor, and somebody on your staff is positive, you're not going to have negative pressure in your office. You're going to have positive pressure.
It's the buildings that businesses I guess utilize, none of them are going to have negative pressure unless someone like retrofits it, but I don't see that being practical.
So let's say that people are at work. Let's say that next week somebody says you can go back to work, and let's say there's businesses that don't pay attention to this stuff, And let's say that they put a bunch of people in one room at a call center, whatever, and our meat packing plant. And let's say that it's not negative pressure. And let's say nobody's sneezing or coughing. Let's use that example. They're just breathing. And let's say 60% of the people there are asymptomatic carriers of the virus. And they're just breathing, okay? Now they're blowing out the, I guess, aerosols of the virus, I guess, right? And all combined, let's say there's, I don't know, 50 people, 60% of those are infected. And so 30 people are blowing out whatever, okay, the virus. Are you saying those aerosols, even if they're not sneezed or coughed directly into the return for the AC or whatever, they can accumulate into such a good degree that they can eventually get swooped into the air conditioning system? Is that what this study says?
That's what the CDC is I guess implying. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, now that article was written by somebody where? What country were they from?
So
one of them was Singapore. What was the first?
Yeah, and let's see if I can get it pulled up here real quick on the fly. Once I switch it out on my viewer here, it goes away. But
and what's the process for the CDC releasing an article? Does that mean somebody at the CDC actually read it and said, this is reliable, let's put this out?
Yeah, so they have a journal that they call the Emerging Infectious Diseases Journal. And so that it's for the early release of the July. And it says the early releases are not considered final versions. Any changes will be reflected in an online version in the month the article is officially released. But they want to get this information out there, and it's to prevent the spread of virus in restaurants. We recommend increasing the distance between tables and improving ventilation. That was like the takeaway, and they're hoping that.
What country is that?
So it was the restaurant that they analyzed was in China, and then there was, it looks like it was a conglomerate of individuals that were all on board with publishing this. But yeah, I see China in here for a couple, and then let's see here, and then yeah, there was like two other ones in here. I can't find them immediately.
All right, so let's say the Chinese officials, whoever wrote this article, did the study. They then send this to the CDC. Who at the CDC, which is an American organization, who approves it for release to like you?
They have like an editorial board. I mean, it's a journal just like all these other journals. So there's a group of, I guess, scientists, because it's not all physicians necessarily that are reading these things, or sociologists or behavioral psychologists, that kind of stuff, and looking at, well, I think the CDC probably has representatives on their editorial boards that are not all just American. I think they try to, get all the representative makeup.
My point is, if I went tonight and made up some journal article and put a bunch of crap in it and sent it off to the CDC, it probably wouldn't get approval, right?
No, yeah. So no, there's a formal way that they present all this, and there are some clearing for when people have scientific papers, because you don't always necessarily send it to one journal publishing house. You send it to this clearinghouse, and the doctors peer review it, or other scientists peer review it, say, yeah, this is like really good data. And then one of these journals, like if it's a great study, one of the big journals picks it up, and then if not, maybe it ends up in some less known journal, but it's still applicable, and then it gets cited in the future, and that's about it. So right. there's kind of some tiering of journals, kind of like you talking about your tiering of newspaper. So it's the same. If you were to write an article and send it to your favorite publication in the world, you're right. They may just put it in like little like letters to the editor, and that's it.
Right.
So
all right. You have anything else for us to talk about tonight?
So yeah, one other thing, and this came up, I saw it a couple of times, and hat tip to a local banker we both knew who sent this my way.
Mr. Perry Palmer.
Yeah. So
thanks, Perry. Bank of Pensacola.
Yeah. So we'll share this. And so the article was this, and it was that exercise.
Damn, Perry's doing some serious reading. My goodness.
Yeah. No, he didn't send me this, but I went and found this.
Oh,
so
okay.
There's a researcher at University of Virginia in Charlottesville who said that endurance exercise may protect against the deadly complication of like the ARDS, the respiratory distress syndrome, or the storm that these people are experiencing, where like they basically have a gross inflammation across their whole body.
Mm-hmm.
And caveat being is this study right here that I'm showing you was published before this virus became a problem. And
so they're just talking about the storm in regards to other ailments.
It's what he's saying is that endurance exercise increases this one enzyme. It's the extracellular superoxide dismutase. It's at the top there. And that one enzyme, having a higher titer of that in your blood, it allows your body to respond to oxidative stress, the same stress that you experience with infections. And so the idea is, you know, and you develop this enzyme by using your skeletal muscle, by going out for a run, by going for a bike ride, by going for a vigorous walk. And so this guy's saying people need to be doing aerobic exercise, and they need to be doing it for 30 to 60 minutes a day for 5 times a week. And their chances of at least surviving the storm are perhaps a little bit better based on his data here. So the two things I want to tell people are, one, this doesn't mean that people who exercise won't get the disease. You could still have the chance of getting it, but the chance that you're going to be one of those people that either doesn't know it or it's just a case of the sniffles is perhaps a whole lot better in your favor if you are, I guess, an endurance exerciser. So we'll link this on here, and I'll send the link.
And how do they separate the effectiveness of that particular enzyme versus the overall health of the person because they do exercise? Like, how are they able to say that it's this enzyme versus the person's just in great shape?
Because they actually injected this enzyme into lab animals, and they've also found that some people with chronic disease have a lower titer of this. So the implication before the virus was that they could do gene therapy and upregulate your body's ability to make more of this for people who
you're saying
don't have that ability.
Endurance athletes may be like donors for this enzyme, so they could then treat patients with this disease potentially with this enzyme.
Well, I think that's maybe one future possibility. They're talking about just trying to rev up our body's machinery or factory that makes this for people that aren't able to do the endurance exercise.
Right.
So there's some people that have an amputation aren't going to go out and be able to do a vigorous run or whatever. So how do you ramp up their system otherwise? So getting that gene to express and doing gene therapy to basically trick the body's thermostat into making more of this. And that's part of his implications. So again, don't think that you're going to go for a long run so you don't get sick. Think about going for a long run so that if you do get sick, you tolerate it a whole lot better. That's kind of the takeaway there.
That's the takeaway.
So hat tip to our local banker friend. He's working overtime. So
yeah, thank you, Perry.
I will link that as well on the site. Now I'll put the University of Virginia news release that went with that as well. Again, it's kind of weird because he made news out of something he already studied before the virus, but he's trying to think, hey, I've studied this and I think this could be something that would apply. So it's worth the read.
Awesome.
So I think that's basically what I have for right now.
Okay, great.
We'll keep looking, and I think as I've been sitting here, I've gotten like news alerts on my phone about the mayor wants to open up by May 1st and all that. So we'll try and get some information here for tomorrow.
All right. All right. I think I wanted to point out that we had a couple of nursing home intakes today where people are dealing with relatives that are in facilities that have passed away. They're not getting clear information on why they passed away. It sounds a lot like COVID type situations. I don't know yet, but it sounds like death certificates are being somewhat delayed. I'm not sure why, or if it's the people laid off or furloughed or not working that are typically working in the office that generates these things, or if they're being held back by the facility while they do a medical review, or is there some in-house autopsy happening? I don't know the answers to those questions yet, but it sounds like it's happening in a couple of places in town. Obviously, we handle those questions. I was thinking over the weekend that, some people also have legal questions that may not be related to personal injury right now. There may be somebody that has employment law questions. You know, can they fire me? General answer is yes, pretty much, unless you have a contract. But if you have any legal question that surrounds, that relates at all to this virus, insurance, I had an insurance company call today about a claim for business interruption coverage. We don't handle those kind of cases. We refer those out, but we're happy to talk to you about them. If there's banking questions, we know bankers in town that can answer those questions for you. If there's personal injury, medical malpractice, nursing home abuse cases, car wrecks, of course, on the water accidents, we're always here available to talk to you. It just so happens we also have a board certified internal medicine physician as smart as Dr. Malone to help us through these injury questions. He's especially helpful in the medical malpractice and the elder abuse cases. We're here for you. You can find us on the web at zarzaurlaw.com. 855-HIRE-JOE is the old-fashioned telephone way. And you can comment underneath this video if you want, or you can email us both at info@zarzaurlaw.com. Aside from that, social distance, physical distance, whatever you want to call it, be smart, get multiple news sources, not just one. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Dr. Malone.
Yeah, thank you guys.